6 to 9. 6 to 9 years in prison is what former White House lawyer, former ally of Donald Trump, Ty Cobb, is saying this new superseding indictment has Donald Trump at risk of. He thinks this is rock solid, ironclad, unflappable, inarguable. It's going to happen. And for that matter, Ty Cobb has been correct all along the way with every prediction he's made. I don't know that I've heard of him make a claim legally in his field of expertise that has gone sour. He's right about this shit. And I want to read for you just a couple of sections, just a little bit from the intro of this superseding indictment that was released yesterday from a grand jury here in DC about the election interference case. You see, the Supreme Court, when they came down with their ridiculous, fascist-friendly ruling that anything Donald Trump does in an official capacity as president of the United States extricates him from any risk of criminal prosecution because he's the president, he's the king, he can do no wrong, according to 6 wildly conservative, fascist-friendly justices on the Supreme Court, 3 of which Donald Trump put there. So Jack Smith is going around that, retooling the indictment to cover those particular issues related to that Supreme Court ruling. So there are 4 counts. Count 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States. Count 2, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Count 3, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. And count 4, conspiracy against rights. I'm just going to read 2 or 3 paragraphs from this, and then we're going to move on. Introduction. 1, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, was a candidate for president of the United States in 2020. He lost the 2020 presidential election. 2, despite having lost, the defendant, who was also the incumbent president, was determined to remain in power. So, for more than 2 months following Election Day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false. But the defendant used his campaign to repeatedly and widely disseminate them anyway to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. 3, as a candidate and a citizen, the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. So they're framing it as, look, absolutely, Donald Trump had a right to speak. We're not disputing that. But that's not what this lawsuit is about. It's not about his right to speak and even lie about the election. It's about fraud. It's about the usurpation of constitutional rights and civil rights in this country and this case. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as by seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcomes in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. And then they go through the case. But this is not a hatchet job. This is not a railroad. This is absolutely a metered legal document that was allowed based on citizens coming together in a grand jury room, hearing the evidence, and then voting on whether to indict. You may know, many of you are new here and you don't know, but I served on a federal grand jury in Orange County, California when I lived there a couple of years ago. 3 years ago I lived there, but it was about 4 years ago. I was on the grand jury that indicted Michael Avenatti for his fraud and using funds that were recovered in lawsuits of his clients for himself. I understand the grand jury process. Now, they say that you can indict a ham sandwich if you like, and that is true to a degree because of the fact that you're not required to present exculpatory evidence to a grand jury. But this case is in such the zeitgeist, a lot of this information was public. We've seen the evidence. We know what Donald Trump did. We witnessed it with our own eyes. You don't have to be in the grand jury room to understand the ins and the outs of this case and the crime that was committed in plain view, in plain public view for the rest of the United States. And now Donald Trump's grifting off of this. He sent me this email with the banner at the top, breaking news, turning this into a fundraising effort. How many times do I have to go through this? Another Jack Smith hoax. They never point to anything that Jack Smith has done that is actually wrong or a hoax or fake or a witch hunt, because everything that Jack Smith is alleging, we also witnessed. The Harris-Biden regime weaponized the DOJ. It's just the same, playing the same hits. I've beaten all the hoaxes before and I'll do it again. Here we go again. They indicted me. They impeached me, blah, blah, blah. So here is a portion, not the full thing, but a portion of the interview between Aaron Burnett and Ty Cobb, that lawyer I talked about, who says Donald Trump is looking at he's not going to be in prison forever, but it's likely, thankfully, he's going to die in prison for his crimes against the country. And not even for his most serious crimes that I believe are related to his ignoring and mishandling willfully of COVID, where more than 1.25 million Americans died of a disease that could have been handled more responsibly. That in and of itself should lead you to believe that this guy should die in prison. Here's Aaron Burnett and Ty Cobb talking about it.
Ty Cobb now, former Trump White House lawyer. Ty, you've had a chance to read through these 36 pages, obviously slimmed down just a little bit, not much, 9 pages fewer than the original indictment filed last year, keeping those 4 key charges and editing, emphasizing that it is in a personal, private capacity under which Smith has the authority to make this indictment. Did he do it? Does this indictment make a clean-cut case that the acts were personal?
I think it does. I think, some of the editing that you highlighted in your intro is spot on, emphasizing the private nature of many of these acts, the private funding of the speech at the before the Capitol intrusion, Pence's ceremonial role, the non-governmental roles of the co-conspirators, which they can now say categorically, and now that Jeffrey Clark is out, because he was the only government official who was actually in the original indictment. He's no longer in this indictment. So all the co-conspirators were acting in their private capacity. I think this threads the needle. If I'm Trump's lawyers, and I'm surprised, I'm scratching my head at that, because this was the reasonable approach to take. You no reason to go through a series of hearings before Judge Chutkan and force the task of editing the indictment on her when you can put forward a forceful case like this.
And do the work for her. All right, so then what happens? She gets this case, as Evan was laying out, next week. What happens then? And does it eventually just go back to the Supreme Court? Is this fast or slow from here?
So it'll be slow from here, not merely because of the superseding indictment. Whatever the indictment was going to look like after it went through whatever hearings the Judge Chutkan is going to have, and she still will have a hearing on the adequacy of this indictment. It does have, there is a interlocutory appeal available, at least as I read the Supreme Court decision. And that doesn't mean the Supreme Court has to take it if the D.C. Circuit acts before and they're content with whatever they do. But this is definitely, this hasn't been on course to go before the election for months. This was never going. That was never going to happen. But as you point out, this is a very forceful document. It's pared down. Every sentence is, crisply worded. It's a tight narrative. You can't read this and not understand the crimes that Trump actually committed. And as you pointed out, 55 years is exposure. That he's not going to get 55 years, but he'll get 6 to 9 on this.
So can I ask you about that? 6. Okay, so you think he could get 6 to 9? And obviously, I'd put out 55 just to so people understand the seriousness of these charges. But even 6 to 9, for someone his age, it's very significant.
That's a guy who understands the law. That's a guy who's worked for Donald Trump in the White House, knows the stakes, knows the mechanisms by which this will happen. And he is saying, the guy who's been right all along, that he's looking at 6 to 9 years in prison, that this is an unflappable version of this indictment. For me, I would say it should buoy your spirit. If you're somebody who looks at the world through a reality lens and not a MAGA lens, not a QAnon lens, good news. Anyway, I'd throw the conversation to you. You can comment below. If you don't want to comment or you don't have something to say, just, here's your comment. Click. It'll trigger YouTube to share this content with new people, and that is great. If you want to get your voice on the record, you can call 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me as always, daily@dollemore.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to help support this work, not if you're on a fixed income or you can't manage $2 a month extra because all your funds are accounted for, great. Just make sure you're subscribed. But if you have an extra $2 and you want to help support this work and help me make these videos, click the join button below, $2 a month to become a channel member. You can go to my Patreon page, patreon.com/idoubtitpodcast. Great ways to help support the work. Follow me on social media. I'm at Dollemore. All of your grand jury questions I'll answer there. Not an expert. I just served on one for more than a year. At Dollemore is where I am on social media. I'd love to see you there. I'll see you next time. Be genuine. Take care of one another.